Do you struggle to understand the ISO 14001-2015 requirement for internal audit? Are you concerned that you may have to conduct your internal EMS audit on an annual basis and to cover all of the 14001 requirements? An ISO interpretation could help you more fully understand whether internal audit is an annual requirement and must cover all of its requirements. Let's take a look. Welcome to EMSmastery, where we look at the strategies and tactics to be successful in environmental management. If we're meeting for the first time, my name is Andrew Marlowe. This episode looks at one of the interpretations given by the ISO Technical Committee TC 207 Subcommittee 1, which is the subcommittee responsible for ISO 14001 and other associated environmental international standards. The interpretation process operates as an escalation of an interpretation inquiry from a national member body, such as BSI in the UK and ANSI in the United States, with all interpretation inquiries reviewed on an annual basis and their results published on the Subcommittee 1 website. It is important to note that its interpretations do not change the requirements of ISO 14001, but are intended to give users a better understanding on ISO 14001. The question about internal audit was raised by the American National Standards Institute, ANSI, and relates to the intent of Clause 9.2. The question asked was, does ISO 14001 Section 9.2 require that the organisation conducts its internal EMS audit on an annual basis covering all elements, i.e. the full scope of the ISO 14001 standard? A quick recap on Clause 9.2.2 in its first part shows that it has requirements for the organisation to establish, implement and maintain an internal audit programme, which shall include the frequency, methods, responsibilities, planning requirements and reporting of its internal audits. Additionally, the internal audit programme should take into account consideration of the environmental importance of the processes concerned, changes affecting the organisation and the results of previous internal audits. So, back to the question. The interpretation response clarifies that the first part of the question, referring to whether the EMS internal audit should be conducted on an annual basis, has already been addressed in an earlier ISO interpretation. You can find out the answer to whether internal audit should be conducted on an annual basis in the episode highlighted in the card link in the top right hand corner and in the description box below. The second part of the question asks whether an internal EMS audit must cover all elements of ISO 14001 during the audit. The Environmental Management System Audit Programme should take into account consideration of the environmental importance of the processes concerned, changes affecting the organisation and the results of previous audits. So, according to ISO 14001, in order to be comprehensive, the audit programme should embrace the audit criteria, scope, frequency and methods, as well as the responsibilities and requirements for planning and conducting audits, reporting results and retaining associated documented information. The interpretation then clarifies that ISO 14001 does not require that all elements of ISO 14001 be audited each and every time an audit is conducted, nor does it require every single element to be audited within a 1-year period. However, it goes on to explain that the internal audit programme is required to be established with consideration of the various factors discussed earlier relating to audit criteria, scope, frequency and methods, as well as the responsibilities and the requirements for planning and conducting audits, reporting results and retaining associated documented information. It further clarifies the organisation should consider the purpose of the audit, i.e. to determine whether or not the environmental management system conforms to, firstly, the organisation's own requirements for its environmental management system, secondly, the requirements of the international standard, and whether or not the environmental management system has been effectively implemented and maintained. The interpretation finally states that these factors should be considered by the organisation in determining the necessity for auditing each element of ISO 14001 and at what frequency, such as annually, each and every time the audit is conducted, or over a period that exceeds 1 year. So, to summarise, the ISO TC 207 Subcommittee 1 interpretation clarifies that there is no explicit requirement for all elements of ISO 14001 to be audited each and every time an audit is conducted, nor does it require that each and every element is audited within a 1 year period. However, the organisation will need to consider the purpose of the internal audit, as well as the audit criteria, scope, frequency and methods, the responsibilities and requirements for planning and conducting audits, reporting results and retaining associated documented information, in coming to its determination of the necessity of auditing each element of ISO 14001 and the frequency of the internal audit. Further information on this interpretation is given in the description box below, including a link to the resources on the EMSmastery.com website. If this episode has helped to advance your own understanding of the internal audit requirements of ISO 14001-2015, then please subscribe to this YouTube channel to ensure that you don't miss out on future episodes on environmental management and sustainability. Until then, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this video, you can watch other episodes by clicking on the boxes in the top and bottom right, and to subscribe to this channel, click on the link to the left. Thank you.